I'll just repeat. My name is Annie Frederick. I'm the Executive Director of the Hawaii Alliance for Progressive Action. And I'm going to go ahead and share screen real quick. Sorry, 1 second. Okay, so a little bit about HAPA. So HAPA was actually founded in 2014 and really grows out of the movement, particularly to regulate the impacts of the agrochemical industry presence in Hawaii. Initially, the organization was really founded by communities that were exposed to pesticide drift from agrochemical test fields in Hawaii. But that was sort of our way into the broader food system. Fair and sustainable food systems of our 4 program areas still continues to be our largest program area, but we see these other program areas really developed as sort of intersectional areas that really are informed by our experience working on the food systems transformation. So, community-based resource stewardship, ensuring that, we have clean water, the waters flow to the places they need to support our food system, and that we have farmers have access to land. Reclaiming democracy really kind of was informed by some of the challenges that we faced initially passing some really basic common sense pesticide regulation at the county and then state level. And just recognizing the need to build greater political and people power to transform our food system. And then obviously there's lots of intersections with social and economic justice issues as well. And I'm going to share mostly about our food systems policy advocacy work today. And what we really what we found is that there are folks doing amazing work, well, really across the food system. But in the policy arena, that often we see people working in very specific kind of silos. But there wasn't really one place you could go to get kind of comprehensive, at least legislative alerts across the food system. And so I think both HAPA and Food Plus, as Kelsey will share, tried to fill in maybe that gap and providing kind of a one-stop shop for a variety of legislative alerts across the food system. And I will say that our food policy agenda, we kind of have 6 priority areas. It's broad, but I wouldn't say it's entirely comprehensive. We try to do as much as we can with our capacity, but there are still areas across the food system that aren't represented here. So our 6 priority areas are food equity, pesticide protection, support for producers and regenerative practices, indigenous traditional ecological knowledge, food systems planning, and good food procurement. And for the past few years, we've been tracking around 50 bills across these different areas. And like I said, I'll share some of the policy leads as well. And what we try to do for bills that we're not a lead on is we try to just amplify and build support through generating legislative alerts. And we have part of the reason why we pivoted towards doing this is we have a very active list. We have about 20,000 people on our mailing list, and been able to attribute about 40 to 60% of the testimony on the alerts that we sent out. So they're very active. They want to engage around these issues. So we try to sort of add value where we can. The first bucket, and I'm going to kind of go over this policy agenda kind of quickly because Kelsey and Hunter are going to delve a little more deeply into the weeds on some of these particular policies. And I see folks like Danielle on here, which I'm sure talk all day about this particular bucket here. So the policy leads in this area are Hawaii Appleseed, Hi-Fi, Hawaii Hunger Action Network, and Hawaii Food Bank. So yeah, we try to listen to what kind of these organizations are prioritizing and just help to amplify support. So some of the priorities in this area are universal school meals, so free breakfast and lunch for all public school students, $2, which you all are probably pretty familiar with, doubling the purchasing power of SNAP EBT benefits for local produce with a federal match, addressing the SNAP hunger cliff, so increasing who's eligible for SNAP benefits, farm to food bank, which is pretty self-explanatory. And then this is an area where we continue to be the lead advocate. So we support policies that provide public health and environmental protections and are informed by usage data and scientific research. And then in this priority area, we continue to advocate for buffer zones that are informed by science, and that's specifically for restricted use pesticides. And reclassifying, so neonicotinoids are the largest, currently the largest class of insecticides used, and there's a growing body of research showing kind of impacts to pollinators and human health and broader environmental health. So trying to get those classified as an RUP so we get a sense of how much they're used in Hawaii, now that Hawaii requires reporting on the usage of restricted use pesticides. And then also improved disclosure. So the current reporting that we have now is not geographically specific enough to conduct public health studies. So it's reported by TMKs, which can vary really widely in size. We really need what California has, which is reporting within a square mile of application. And then support for producers and regenerative practices. So this is a whole range of subsidies for and tax incentives for food producers, and then also supports for regenerative agricultural practices. And I put policy lead as Hawaii Farmers Union United. There probably are others, maybe I'm missing, so apologies for any oversight there. And Hunter can share more about some of these policies in particular. So there's things in here like transportation cost reimbursement, inter-island tax shipping tax credit for produce and ag products, food manufacturers tax credits, farmer and producer tax credits, agriculture investment program. So these are just all different forms of either tax incentives or subsidies. In past years, we've seen more things like direct grants as well. This year doesn't seem to be particularly, the legislature doesn't really seem to be moving these particular set of bills. And then this one around healthy soil. So many states have adopted similar programs that are kind of comprehensive and assessing soil health, and then also identifying practices for improving soil health, carbon capture, things like that. And then also financial incentives for those practices. So this is sort of a comprehensive program. And then this bucket being Indigenous traditional ecological knowledge, so incentives and subsidies for kalo farming, protection of public trust, traditional and customary practices, fish pond restoration and support, community-based fisheries, and limu. So we mostly check in with KUA on what their priorities are here and try to provide support for those. And it varies from year to year. This year, most of the bills have been around fish pond restoration. But there's also this bill, this is actually more coming from some of our water law experts in Hawaii. We recognize that if we don't have stream flow restoration, we don't have water flowing to especially places like rural taro farming communities, those communities are not going to be able to engage in their traditional customary practices. So this particular bill, which actually has a hearing tomorrow, so if you want to submit testimony, you can today. It's really looking at kind of removing political influence that could on the Water Commission in particular, and what we saw sort of post Lahaina and some of the attempts to suspend the water code or roll back some of the ground and surface water designations in West Maui that kind of continually has drought conditions. this bill is really designed, and this is based on kind of historic recommendations to kind of protect it from that kind of influence so that they can ensure that they're doing their meeting their public trust obligations. And then, like I said, a lot of these are CUA priorities that we're helping to provide support for. So just a range of bills designed to, like, in some cases, streamline the leasing process for government-owned lands and prioritizing community co-management, native Hawaiian practices, things like that, support for hatcheries, fish pond hatcheries, restocking, feasibility study for restorative aquaculture that prioritizes rural and native Hawaiian practices. So things like that. In past years, there's been, like incentives for kalo farming, protection of kalo lands. So it kind of varies from year to year. Also, there's a bill and a companion on either side to support food systems planning. So looking at, how broad our food system is and the need to kind of for the state to create a comprehensive plan with benchmarks to ensure that we actually are meeting our goals, our food security goals. So both of these bills are actually awaiting a hearing in WAM. So they are effectively dead for this session. Good food procurement. So this is, again, looking at the purchasing power of the state. So things like farm to school, farm to state, and the policy leads here would be farm to school Hui, which is part of Hi-Fi, Hawaii Farmers Union United. Yeah. So every year there's usually like these farm to school bills that are looking to, like, address sort of the challenges of farm to school getting the traction or meeting its goals. And this one has been, I think, I think farm to school has been pretty frustrating for the folks who are like doing that work. Some, I think, who are on this call within the DOE or kind of doing that kind of internal administrative work. And then, yeah, there's a bill that was heard. I don't actually know what the outcome was yesterday. Maybe somebody on this meeting knows. And then another farm to school priority this year was the agriculture education coordinator position. So I'll share a little bit more too about our kind of main subject matter expertise around pesticides and public health. So in 2018, we advocated for a bill that mandated reporting of restricted use pesticides that became Act 45. So 2019 was the first year that we had RUP data reported. And what we learned is there's actually a surprisingly small number of RUP users. And of that, like, universe, I think in 2019, it was like 36 users, farms at least. And of that group, they were using very little amounts, actually. And what we found is that there's really a handful of users that are driving the majority of the use across Hawaii, but that Central Oahu and the North Shore of Oahu are by far the heaviest, like, pounds per acre usage in Hawaii. And also like large combinations of restricted use pesticides. And for anyone who's not familiar, restricted use pesticides are not like the ones you can buy over the counter at Home Depot. They require a certified applicator. So we saw really in 2019 a whopping 216,000 plus pounds in that 1 year, in that kind of corridor between Central Oahu and the North Shore. And then some of our findings were that there were 16 highly hazardous pesticides used in that area. 13 of those are banned in other countries, some as many as 58 countries. 4 are known carcinogens, 3 are possible or probable carcinogens, and 2 are unclassifiable. 5 are known reproductive developmental contaminants, 12 are endocrine disruptors, Three are known groundwater contaminants, and 7 are probable water contaminants. 15 are significantly toxic to aquatic life, and 12 are toxic to bees. And 4 have very high potential to drift off target. What we also found is that only 10 users account for 99% of all the restricted use pesticide usage in Hawaii. And it's really like 5 account for 97%. So the majority of food producers actually aren't using a ton of these pesticides. And some particular areas of concern are kind of adjacencies to these residential areas. The majority of RUP usage that's driving those really high numbers in this area are 2 fumigants that are used really heavily. And what's concerning about those fumigants is they're amongst those that are highly prone to drift. So we see some concerning adjacencies with Whitmore Village, Wahua, Waialua areas in particular, and a bit Mililani as well. One of those fumigants is 1,3-D or Telone 2, which is used mostly, I think, for nematodes, but it's a known carcinogen, and it's known to drift like miles off target just because it's highly volatile. And then these are some of the other pesticides that are used in that area. And again, just kind of zooming in on some of those adjacencies from other users. So another fumigant that's used really heavily in Hawaii is metamsodium, not nearly as heavily as 1,3-D, but again, it's also a carcinogen, other impacts as well, and highly prone to drift. So those are 2 that are of concern and that also just inform our pesticide regulation priorities. But like I said, the good news is that most of our producers really aren't using a heavy amount of RUPs at all. So it's sort of common sense that some of these like basic protections should be kind of a no-brainer. But yeah, so we continue to work on those, although we have one bill that requires better reporting that has a hearing on Friday, and a joint hearing of WAM and CPM, which is Ways and Means Committee, and Consumer Protection, Commerce and Consumer Protection Committee in the Senate. And I'll just say in closing that I think one reason why we engage in this arena is because there's really just not enough people and organizations to create the change we need, the kind of policy change we need. There's so much amazing work being done across our food system, but we really do, if we do want to transform our food system in Hawaii, we do just need more people to engage in this arena. And with that, I'll go ahead and pass it off. Thanks so much.
Awesome.